Georgia Bulldogs versus the Alabama Crimson Tide for the college football natty. This is Remember That Game, the podcast about sporting events that take you on a journey and maybe chart the path of the zeitgeist. I'm your host, Thomas Emerick, and my guest is Jeremiah Johnson, creator of the Infinite Scroll newsletter on Substack on the politics and dynamics of the social internet. Also creator of the Center for New Liberalism and corresponding show, The New Liberal Podcast. Folks may have come across his annual Worst Tweets bracket that comes out every December. We'll flip over to January of 2022, the title game. Jeremiah, as a millennial Georgia Bulldog, who else could you find standing in the way than Bama?
I mean, most of the SEC, most of college football. I was born in the 80s, the late 80s, and most of my childhood being a Georgia football fan was an exercise in frustration. Georgia was this team that everybody thought should be good and just was always always the bridesmaid, never the bride, got close a bunch of times, had a bunch of good teams, but had not been able to win a national championship since 1980, when they had Herschel Walker, and that was the magical year. But since 1980, it had been 40 years of having good football teams while never really having one that was great, never having one that was good enough to really get over the hump. And it was, one heartbreak after another. So, being a Georgia fan was an interesting experience growing up in that we were always good, but never quite good enough. And Alabama for a long time was really the boogeyman.
Bama had won 6 of the previous 12 national titles. Georgia, none since 1980. Technically New Year's Day 81 when they clinch it in the Sugar Bowl. Herschel Walker was MVP of that game. But 42 years pass by, and he's running a whole touchdown behind the national environment in Senate wins above replacement for 2022. A 4-decade interregnum between Bulldog banners from 80-81 to 2021-2022, during which you have nearby programs doing better, like you mentioned some of them, Florida, Bama, Clemson, Georgia Tech nearby, or down in Atlanta, south of Athens. Georgia Tech was better in the 90s. Jeremiah, how'd you get to being a UGA fan?
I just grew up that way. It was always in my family. I was going to Georgia games from the time I was 5 or 6 years old. Some of my earliest memories going down to Athens. I lived in the metro Atlanta area. And we would take down a couple hour trip to Athens, tailgate before the games. It was just always in my family. But you're totally right that, part of the pain of being a Georgia fan was not just that we could never really get over the hump. It's that everybody else was. The University of Tennessee to our north won a title, I believe, in 1998. Florida won a title in the 90s with Steve Spurrier, and then won 2 more, I think, under Urban Meyer. And Alabama and Auburn both won titles. Every Clemson had won titles. Every state that surrounded us basically had teams winning national titles. This was the renaissance of Southern college football. The SEC had some time period where it was like the SEC won 7 or 8 national titles in a row from various teams, and none of them were us. And that sucked. And it was just, I don't know, man. I remember the 2012 SEC championship. It was Georgia versus Alabama. And it came down to the last play where Georgia was down by 4 points and was close. And we threw the ball and we got a pass completed to the 2-yard line, and time ran out. That was the final play. And if we had gotten 2 more yards, if we had had 15 more seconds, we probably win that game and go on to win the national title, because Alabama and us in 2012, I believe, were the best and second best team in the country. Alabama went on to crush Notre Dame in the national championship game easily, and it just happened over and over. We had gotten to the national championship in 2018, but again, Alabama beat us. Alabama was also there in the national championship, and again they were in the way, and they broke our hearts in overtime. And it kind of felt like we would, number one, we would never get over the hump, and number two, it was always going to be Alabama standing in the way there. I think by the time this kind of 2021 championship game comes about, Georgia had lost 7 straight games to Alabama, and in virtually every single one of those games, Georgia was a top 5 team, and we just kept losing to Alabama anyway, 7 times in a row. And usually more than half of those were either the SEC championship or the national championship. It was just, it felt like we were stuck in purgatory. It felt like we were never going to get out.
2016, when they move on from Richt to Kirby Smart, who they hire from under Nick Saban, his staff at Alabama. Within 3 years, they lose the Natty to Bama by 3 in 2018. Now go another 3 years to 2021, where Smart drops to 0-4 against his former boss, and they're entering the SEC title number 1, but lose to Bama there in 2021.
Yeah, no, it's crazy because this year in the 2021 season, Georgia had been number 1 most of the year. We had looked like unbeatable. We were playing so well. We had one of the best defenses in the history of college football, frankly. Certainly one of the best defenses in the last decade or 2 decades, and just beating the crap out of everybody. Number 1, and we go into the SEC championship game undefeated and play Alabama and lose again. And it just felt like hopeless. It felt like this is the monkey we will never get off our backs. But we got into the college football playoff anyway because it was our only loss. And set up a rematch in the championship game.
That loss kicks them from the 1-4 game to the 2-3 game. Alabama would win the 1-4 against University of Cincinnati, while Georgia would have to play Michigan out of the Big Ten. And they take care of business pretty handily. But Big Ten on the come up in the years since 2021. Yeah, you have NIL, you have geographic expansion, you have the maturity of their media network. Does that put fear in your heart as an SEC fan that not only is Michigan, Ohio State, are they winning titles, but now even Indiana is a national champion out of the Big Ten?
I mean, I thought it was great that Indiana got a title. Who wouldn't love that story, right? If it's not going to be Georgia, then why not somebody like Indiana, who is the worst team in the history of college football? Coming into this season, I think they had the most losses of anyone in the history of college football. And they have this undefeated, perfect season. Like, good for them, man. Their fans probably thought they would never see something like that. 3 years ago, being an Indiana fan, you were probably just praying to go 6-6 and make a bowl game. Awesome for them. I'd rather it be them than like Ohio State. It is interesting how NIL has changed college football because it is a very different sport now. Like, the Georgia titles in 21 and 22 were kind of like at the precipice of a new era. We weren't fully in the modern era yet. The transfer portal was starting to be a thing, but it wasn't yet as crazy as it is now, where half the team of certain teams transfers every single year. We were getting like a little bit of transferring back then, and NIL was not really a big factor yet. And I think kind of like the way this used to work was that it used to really matter that you had like a network of good old boys who would pay for, stuff, and everybody paid players under the table. If you got caught, you were just doing it badly. But like, this was a thing that happened everywhere with a big football tradition. But I think what NIL did was it kind of moved us away from that network of good old boys who did things very informally. And, you would have a bunch of local successful businessmen kind of paying into this kind of thing. And it moved it more towards the model of like, you need a whale. You need a billionaire. And, the fact that Indiana has no network of good old boy football boosters doesn't matter because they have Mark Cuban, who is richer than all the good old boys in Alabama combined. And so, like, Mark Cuban can just fund the whole thing by himself. And he did. Basically all of Indiana's NIL comes from Mark Cuban. But like it doesn't matter. The absence of tradition used to be a really, really big factor and a really big handicap for places like Indiana. And it's just not anymore. And, you can talk about whether or not this kind of takes out some of the soul of college football, that the players are now like independent contractors on year-to-year contracts, and loyalty is kind of dead. And like, you can talk about that, but I don't know. It's definitely changed things a lot. It's enabled a much more flattened playing field, I think. I would be surprised if there's another school that goes like, 6 titles in 12 years.
Just please give me some geographic coherence. If we need to take some teams out of the Big Ten.
The Atlantic Coast Conference has 2 teams in California, which is, I would be lying if I said that this all doesn't affect me a little bit, because there's something special about college sports where, the tradition and the loyalty are what matters, because obviously the players in college basketball and college football are not as good as the professionals. They're younger, they're less experienced. The professional game is a better product in both instances, but you have a personal tie to a university in a way that you really don't with, like, your city's football team. And at least growing up in the South, that's how it was. Maybe people in the Northeast, people in like Philly and Boston and New York, they're more attached to their professional sports teams. It's college sports are not as big of a thing up there, maybe. But in the South, it's just the tradition and the pomp and the circumstance and the pageantry of it all is really important. And part of that is the history, the regionalism of it, the fact that for a long time in college football, there was no national championship. You just played some bowl games, and then people voted and argued at the end of the year. And like maybe 4 different teams would have a claim to the championship. Who knows? It was all like, that's part of what made it special. And I'm kind of grappling with like 2 ideas, which is like, number one, the players do deserve to get paid. They deserve to be paid because this is a machine that now, it's not the 1960s anymore. In the 1960s, I don't think it would have mattered as much. But in the modern age, people are making tens of billions of dollars off of this sport. And the players used to be getting none of it. And that's clearly just morally wrong, that you build the sport on their backs and they're, sacrificing their bodies and they're getting none of the revenue from that. Like, that is untenable and it was wrong. And I'm glad the players are getting paid. But it also just like the way that like right now players are total free agents every single year. And you'll see, a small school have an unexpectedly good year and immediately all of their players leave. And like half their team will just leave in the transfer portal, and the small school will go back to being terrible because they can't afford to pay them all, and they just all get poached. And players, I don't know. There's something about how the free agent nature of it, it makes it so mercenary that it does kind of destroy the tradition and the pageantry that made it special. And, the part of that is conference realignment too. Yeah. That, why are UCLA and Rutgers in the same conference? Like it used to be special that the West Coast teams would play all the West Coast teams and the Northeast would play the Northeast. And I don't know. I struggle with both those things, thinking that people should be paid, but that college football is not what it used to be. And I don't know what the solution is. Maybe we just need to turn it into a fully semi-professional sport, in the sense that like have multi-year contracts like every other sport does. Like every other sport on the planet, you have multi-year contracts, right? You sign for an NFL team, you're there for 4 years or 3 years or whatever. You sign for an NBA team or a European soccer team or whatever, it's multiple years, and maybe that's what college football needs as well. But I do think something will have to be done soon.
Before a lot of this scope creep with conference geography began or really got into full gear, we had the national championship between Bama and Georgia. Georgia 2.5 point favorites, but Smart 0-4 against Saban. And that takes us to the title game there, January 10th, 2022. Top three Twitter terms that day were Flores. Brian Flores had been fired by the Dolphins. Raiders, who had just clinched a playoff berth on Sunday Night Football, and hashtag Go Dogs. Normal stuff. Jeremiah, in your annual worst tweets bracket, with 4 regions, you illuminate the primary vectors of social media brain rot in the year that was. 4 regions / categories of terminally online posts get voted on. And bad social media posts can happen to anyone, especially in 2021. Do you think that was the peak year for please touch grass types of social media interactions, being near the tail end of isolation and all?
That's a good question. I that was near peak Twitter because Elon had not bought the site yet. We were coming out of COVID. I really think kind of the most touch grass era really does belong to kind of that early COVID era of like people literally needed to get outside. The nation went kind of crazy from all being cooped up, and it was like it was also before TikTok had really become like a massive cultural force. Like TikTok existed at that point, but it it had not yet really overtaken Twitter in terms of influence. It was on its way. It was maybe around, I don't know, 2022 that TikTok I feel like really started to overtake Twitter in terms of influence. But that might have been peak Twitter, pre Elon, slightly post COVID, but not really fully out of it. Just the center of national discourse, and in all the good and bad ways that implies. Really fun experience to be on there in some ways, but also not good for us, not good for our political climate or, frankly, our mental health. So it's tough to nail it down, but that would have been close.
Yeah, and again, the annual worst tweets bracket, great tool for introspection. Even, could happen to any of us, that brain poisoning of being online a little too much. Are we generally on an upward or downward trajectory here in 2026?
Oh, the fully downward.
Oh
I
God,
don't even think it's a question. I mean,
we're posting crazier.
the we are the internet has destroyed so much, and really social media has destroyed so much of our ability to reason, of our political climate. The I wrote a piece a few years back called "The Internet is for Extremism," because I believe that social media and the internet more generally structurally encourage extremism in almost everything they do. And like I'll use a non-political example before I get super political. But like, are you familiar with Mr. Beast?
Oh yeah, he like pays people to do stuff. It's like, yeah, it's the extent of it. I
He's
haven't watched a video,
Yeah,
but I think he pays people to do random stuff, right?
he's the biggest YouTuber in the world. He's probably the biggest social media influencer
Yeah.
personality in the world. He has like 300 or 400 million YouTube subscribers and just an equally insane number on TikTok and every other platform. And the thing that made him famous, his first like really big breakout video was when he was a small YouTuber because he hadn't broke out yet. And he had a couple little things. He was starting to get a little bit of attention. And so he was starting to get some sponsors getting interest. And he had one sponsor that wanted to sponsor a video. And they said, we'll give you $5,000. Like, what's your video idea? And he went to them and he said, what I want you to do is to give me twice that. I want you to give me $10,000 because it's a bigger, rounder number. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the $10,000 to a homeless person on the street. And I promise you it will go viral. And he had to like argue with them for like hours to get them to double the money And he was like, it has to be 5,000 doesn't work. It has to be 10,000. I'm going to give it to someone. I'm going to film it. It's good. I promise you it will go viral. And it did. It was his first really big viral video. And he had this instinct that like, you just have to go big. And the next video he did was, I gave $20,000 to a guy on the street. And then he started giving away 40,000 and 50,000. And he started giving away Lamborghinis. And he started giving, at one point he gave away a full house. He found a homeless person on the street and said, would you like a house? And like walked them over to a house and gave them a full house. And the thing that he realized that is his particular form of demented genius is that you just have to go bigger. Everything on his channel is the biggest, the most. You know, why would I watch someone give $500 to a homeless person when I could watch them give $50,000 to a homeless person? Why would I watch someone bake a 10-pound cake when you know, Mr. Beast is over there baking a 500-pound cake, the world's largest cake? You know, everything he does is of that style, because why would you ever settle for second best? You have access to everything on the internet. And that, I think, is the same way the internet influences our politics. Why would you be a little bit to the left if you could be way to the left? If you could be the most to the left? Why would you be a little bit to the right if you could be the most to the right? If you could be the most edgy, the most racist, the most communist, the most of anything? The only way to stand out, the only way to get attention is to just be the biggest and most extreme version of whatever you're doing. I think that's just a structural feature of how social media works. And it's why everything is terrible right now.
Folks can check out Jeremiah's musings and all these things at Infinite Scroll on Substack.
If you're as brain poisoned as I am by the internet, then please come on in. The water's fine.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I've fully brain diseased after being on social media in various forms since the mid 2000s, and during that time, Nick Saban had won 6 titles. He's looking for a 7th at Bama, and it starts off bad for him seemingly. Bryce Young has Jordan Davis in his face unexpectedly. First drive, ball hits the ground. Georgia takes it back, but review turns out Bryce Young had gotten it out as an incomplete pass. And then Alabama puts 3 on the board after driving down with relative ease, and Georgia quickly punts. Are you in the, oh no, it's happening all over again against Bama, a mental state there at that point?
I was not panicked yet at that point. You know, a field goal down was nothing compared to like the pain that we've had. Like I'm the kind of fan who, as long as we're within shooting distance, as long as we're within like a score, I'm going to be okay. I'm still trying to think positively. I was a little cheesed that we didn't get this touchdown, because I still kind of think that it should have been like, we should have gotten that touchdown, that he had not actually been one of those, like, is it a forward pass or did he fumble? It's on the line. I thought it was kind of BS that they called it a fumble. Like you can tell I'm still working the refs like years later, but yeah, at that point I was still like, it's okay. It's still the first quarter. You know, we're fine. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Overturned. Jordan Davis, nice job of blowing through the line there. And he and Jalen Carter, a huge part of keeping them in this, along with a front 7 as Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean. A lot of players from this Georgia side would not only go pro, but go in the early rounds.
That defense, man, we got to talk about that defense for a second, because I believe they had 5 first-round picks in the NFL draft that year. And five defensive players all picked in the first round. And that actually kind of understates how good they were, because the next year they had 2 guys drafted from the defense in the first round. So that defense is playing with 7 first-round draft picks. And Nakobe Dean was not one of them. Nakobe Dean might have been the second best player on the defense. He was not drafted till the 3rd round, I believe, because teams were he had torn his pectoral muscle, and he didn't. There was like a dispute about like, should he get surgery, should he not get surgery. He was like, I don't want to get surgery. So teams were like, well, we're scared of your injury. He dropped to the third round, but like effectively this team was working off like virtually 8 or 9 defensive players who ended up being drafted in the first round. It was an obscene amount of defensive talent. It was just unbelievable, really.
And a lot of them go to the Eagles. Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Nakobe Dean, Keely Ringo, some of them. Are you like a stealth Eagles fan a little bit after all that? Or I don't know, you're in
A little bit,
Falcons
yeah.
country when you grew up, but you move over to
I
Eagles
never
now.
really cared much about the Falcons. Like, again, I feel like in Georgia, this is just how it is, that you care more about the Georgia Bulldogs than you do about the Falcons. This is, I think, pretty common. If you ask people in Tennessee, do they care more about the University of Tennessee or the Tennessee Titans? Like, there's more Tennessee Volunteer fans than there are Titans fans. And I just think that's kind of how it is. But no, I kind of like, I was cheering for the Eagles when they won the Super Bowl a few years ago because they had so many Bulldogs on the team.
Yeah, and this defense is keeping them in it early while the Volunteers, they, as you mentioned, they won a national title. And they did it with T. Martin. And Georgia has their own T. Martin here with Stetson Bennett. Struggles early. I mean, Saban going after him. They got Christian Harris, an off-ball blitz to, get right after him as soon as he pulls the ball in play action. And it's a little shaky to start off, but eventually a bomb to George Pickens shows signs of offensive life. That's quite a receiving core there with Pickens, Burton, Adonai Mitchell, Lad McConkey.
Brock Bowers.
That tight end. Brock Bowers was quiet during the game, but he'll make a huge play.
Darnell Washington on that team too. Yeah. Who's with the Steelers now, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy. Was there one that jumped out to you immediately, like this, more than the other ones? Like, this guy's definitely gonna be a stud in the NFL.
I would say Pickens and Bowers. Bowers was immediately the best player at his position. That was his freshman year, I think. And he was immediately the best tight end in the country. Like, it was really, really crazy how he came in and was just immediately the best player on the field sometimes. And he didn't actually win the whatever the tight end award is called in 2021. And it was absurd. Like, I think they just gave it to someone else because they didn't want to give it to a freshman. He won it his sophomore and junior year. But like, he was the best tight end in the country all 3 years. Like, as soon as he stepped on campus, he was one of the best players in college football. He was special, man. We would run jet sweeps for a tight end, and he would take them to the house for touchdowns. Like, that's what tight end ever gets a jet sweep called for him? It's insane. And then George Pickens was just a guy who, while he was at Georgia, he struggled a little bit, but it was always struggling with like injuries, or he had one time when he got suspended for a couple games because he fought a Georgia Tech player, I think, at one point. But like, when he was on the field, you could tell that he had like special ability. Yeah. And Pickens had been hurt that whole year. He basically did not play the whole year until the national championship game. And then I think even then he wasn't 100% in that game. He caught the one pass, but I think that's basically the only pass he caught that game, I believe.
And yeah, looking a little androgenic, or the latest top ranked.
There are going to be people listening to this who have absolutely no idea what we're talking about.
We mentioned brain poisoned earlier, and in some ways,
if you don't know what the Chad rankings are, just escape now. You do not need your brain to be that poisoned by the internet. Just get out while you can.
In some ways, could the trials and travails of Will Stansel or the latest top-ranked Chad heal America's brain?
I mean, Will Stansel very obviously has a political faction. It's just that he fights with lots of different people. He fights with people on the left and the right. I have no idea how clavicular represents anything. in terms of our modern politics, other than, like I said, a form of extremism. It's not enough that I'm a young guy who wants to look handsome. I have to be the most handsome. I have to climb the online Chad rankings. These are like, Clavicular is 18 years old taking testosterone because he thinks he's not manly looking enough. This is like a subculture of people who do something called bone smashing, which is where you like hit your face with a hammer
Not for me.
over and over. So under the theory that it will like harden your bones, that you can get like a more prominent chin, to be a bigger Chad, a bit more attractive looking man, if you literally hit your chin with a hammer and cause it like micro fractures, and your chin will grow back bigger, and you'll have like, it's the internet functionally drives us insane. And that's like, this is just, that's all I think about when I think about Clavicular, is it's another way that like extremism is just everywhere online, even in things that you don't think of as extremist.
Do you think in any way it's a nothing new under the sun thing? It's like redressed professional wrestling from the late '90s, which is also crazy.
Yeah, it's what's interesting about it is this is obviously professional wrestling, or alternately it's a soap opera, because soap operas and professional wrestling are the same thing, just gender swapped. But like, soap operas and professional wrestling, if you think about the 80s and the 90s, were very centrally controlled. There was a group of writers who was determining plot lines and storylines, and who's going to win, who's going to lose, who's going to be the hero, who's going to be the villain. This is like decentralized, storytelling. Nobody is there's no central authority planning any of this. There's just clips. There's an army of like clip whores, basically, who watch all these live streams that these people do, and they find the best moments, and they clip it, and they send it out on TikTok and Twitter and Reels, and put it on different subreddits. And the crowd decides who they like and who they don't like, and who's the villain and who's like, it's just very interesting to me how decentralized it all is, that there is no authority anymore determining who gets to win and lose. It's very fickle, crowd driven, distributed decision making. And that, I think, is new and interesting.
And they were not even a gleam in the internet's eye. January 2022, as we roll into halftime, 9-6.
That's a great transition there. The things we're talking about have so little connection to the football game, but we got to stay on track. So
it was a time, January 2022. We're coming. We think we're coming out of the brain poisoning of isolation, but no, we're actually just building on it the next 4 years. And there's also a football game going on. Bennett takes the sack from Dallas Turner to grind another drive to a field goal. So yeah, it's 9-6 the half. Bulldogs down. Is your confidence level at halftime? I mean, you mentioned how you don't get too high or too low. Going into the game, no John Mechie for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then coming out of halftime, Jamison Williams is done as well.
Mm-hmm.
You're down 3, but is your level of confidence rising that you stabilize after?
I'm feeling okay at halftime. Like I said, as long as we're within, shooting distance, as long as we're staying close, I'm the kind of fan who still like, I'm not going to panic. I'm going to feel okay as long as we got a shot. So feeling good at halftime, or not good, but feeling okay at halftime.
End zone finally breached 44 minutes into the game by Zamir White. But Alabama strikes back with 10 quick points, 18-13 lead. Bryce Young is able to get out of the pocket and hit Cameron Latu. Again, you mentioned the front seven Alabama's going to rush for 30 yards on 28 attempts this game. So it's all on Bryce's shoulders. He throws for like nearly 60 times for nearly 400 yards. Alabama has a massive play advantage by the end of it. And you're down with 10 minutes left, 18-13. Is that worrying you how much Alabama is on the field relative to Georgia? Is there
I
done?
hadn't thought
Yeah.
about it that much in terms of the
Is this
play count was not something that was in my head, but I was, it was more just like we've got to make something happen. The offense has got to make something happen. We've been close. We've had we've had some bad breaks. Like again, the thing that like really bugged me, there was a call where Stetson Bennett had a similar play to Bryce Young where the ball kind of pops out of his hand, and it's one of those things. Is it a forward pass or is it a fumble? And early in the game, when it happened to Bryce Young, they had called, oh, well, that's just a forward pass. His hand is awkwardly kind of doing a thing, and we're calling it a forward pass. So your touchdown doesn't count, Georgia. When it happened to Stetson Bennett, they actually called it a fumble. And I was real, kind of pissed off that, like, well, why was it a fumble for us and not for them? And I was like, is this going to decide the game? Is this going to be like we're going to get screwed by an extremely stupid marginal call, and that's going to be what swings the game? But we had the ball. We were down 10 minutes to go, but we had the ball, so I was just hoping that like something would happen. Like we got to make something happen.
arguably not a fumble? Puts Alabama in position to take that lead, and I got to make something happen. Stetson Bennett steadies a bit, delivers confidently on some throws down the stretch, both the
Yeah.
short ones and Adonai Mitchell, 40 yards downfield to retake the lead.
That was such a veteran play from whatchamacallit, from Stetson Bennett, by the way, as well. And I should shout out the defense because the only touchdown, Alabama ran a lot of plays. They ran a lot of plays that game. They had one touchdown on the day, and it was when they got a field, like they got the ball on the 10-yard line, an extremely short field. That's the only touchdown they got the whole day. Other than that, the defense held them to a bunch of field goals, which is what decided the game. The only touchdown was on a 10-yard drive. So big shout out to the defense. But the long touchdown that put the Bulldogs ahead for good was like a 45-yard bomb, and it was a bomb. It was just I'm chucking the ball into the end zone because Alabama had jumped off sides. It was one of those like very, very subtle ones where, sometimes they go, set, hut, and snap the ball. And sometimes they go, set, hut, hut. And they do it like twice in cadence with the idea they try to get you to jump on the first hut and then snap it half a second later so that if a guy jumps, you catch him off sides. And it worked this time. That one defensive lineman had kind of stunted forward and ended up in the offsides position. They snapped the ball immediately. And Stetson Bennett is aware this has happened. He knows, I got a free play. They were offsides. I got a free play. I'm throwing it all the way to the end zone. He if you watch the play, he doesn't go through any reads. He takes the ball. He knows that it's a free play because of the offsides, and he just chucks the ball into the end zone, and we catch it for like a 45-yard touchdown. And just a really savvy veteran play, that is, obviously a great catch, a great toss and catch, but the setup for that I've always really appreciated.
And yeah, it slides to the right, dodging both the off-ball blitz and the blitz pickup by James Cook there. Just a beautiful looking play. Did James Cook strike you as someone who could be like fighting for league rushing titles in the NFL every year?
It's funny. James Cook didn't ever really stand out that much at UGA, partially because we all thought he was a good player, but UGA has always, under Kirby Smart, used kind of a rotation system among running backs. We don't ever have a running back that gets like 1,500 yards. We always have 3 or 4 running backs, and we rotate them heavily because I think his philosophy is about like not wearing down your back. Like running backs are valuable, and if you run them too much, they get beat up and hurt, and they're not as good. So, to some degree, I think this is great for the running backs themselves because they enter the league fresher
Less tread, yeah.
than like with running backs, your body just dies at some point. At some point, you've taken too many hits, and you're just like it happens very quickly where you in the NFL you might have 1,300 yards one year and 300 yards the next year, and you're just done. Your career's just over because you've got too many miles. But I think at Georgia we keep them fresher. I think that's the philosophy anyway. And so James Cook was not the starter. Zamir White was the starter. We called him Zeus. And then we also had Kendall Milton and Kenny McIntosh and some other guys too. Like James Cook was a good player, but I'm a little surprised how well he's done. Like I didn't expect him to be like a leading the NFL kind of guy.
Yeah, if I'm a top running back prospect, I'd much more appreciate getting the James Cook workload than the Mark Ingram workload that he had a few years or about 10 years earlier at Alabama. Um,
Yeah, I'm actually looking at this right now. Like Zeus that year had 850 yards rushing, and James Cook had about 730, and then Kenny McIntosh had another 300. Kendall Milton had another 300. Dijon Edwards had 200. Stetson Bennett had about 250. So we had 6 players with more than 200 yards rushing, if you include Stetson Bennett.
That offensive line getting it done. Warren McClendon would go on to be and is now a good starter for the Rams. Broderick Jones went first round to the Steelers. It's been a little more up and down, but still early on that offensive tackle learning curve in the NFL that some guys take till year 3, year 4 to really hit and then be a good long time starter in the league. So Broderick Jones, Warren McClendon on that line. And in the second half, they really start to establish the run. And Alabama, you can tell, is getting really antsy to take that away. And Georgia takes advantage there with a downfield throw to Adonai Mitchell. And then on the following, they get the ball back to go get some insurance.
Yep.
There is a play where, Alabama, it really is king on the run. And James Cook shows some of that kind of electric ability to turn a loss into a third and very short. And so Alabama's like, let's send the house again. They got the screen on for Brock Bowers. And you get to see him show that ability to catch the ball, turn upfield, untouched. And suddenly you're up by 8.
And that was part of the challenge of that Georgia offense that year, where everybody remembers the defense for good reason. But part of the challenge of that offense was we had 2 or 3 incredible tight ends. Bowers was the best tight end in the country. And he was probably the fastest tight end in the country too, immediately. Like he was running a 4.4 as a freshman or something crazy. And we also had Darnell Washington, the big O, who's like 6'8", 265 or 270, like just a mountain of a guy. And he could go out and like catch passes as well. And we had a couple other young guys who ended up being really good. Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, I think might have been there. But so we could roll out 3 tight end sets, and you didn't know whether we were going to be, basically handing the ball off on a play where it's like we're effectively rushing with like 7 or 8 offensive linemen on the field, or maybe they'll all go out for passes and you have to be able to guard Brock Bowers now and Darnell Washington with like linebackers or safeties. And that's trying to like take care of both of those possibilities was just really, really difficult when you played that Georgia team and they would roll up with multiple tight ends and you didn't know what was going to happen. It was very hard to take care of both of those at once.
Yeah, and Todd Monken, now the Browns head coach.
Good luck.
Yeah, using multiple tight ends, calls a screen at just the right time. Bennett does a good job of getting that out. And George Pickens, downfield catch early on, and on this winning drive, draws a big flag going
Hmm.
downfield. So many weapons to work with. Let's see how the Browns do in the offseason to give Monken something to work with there. Uh, in late 2021, early 2022, you know, to weave back into or to go back into infinite scroll topics. You know, if you know the Ringer can compare any movie character down to the extra to an NBA player. I feel like we can try to compare guys to top ranked Chads or interesting Silicon Valley investments. Seemed like this period was peak Zuck pumping money into the metaverse. How did Roblox stuff him in the locker? And did the metaverse at the time did it seem destined to you?
Yeah, so this is something I've written about, basically, that it's very funny to me that Mark Zuckerberg renamed his company from Facebook to Meta because he believed so strongly in the idea that like the metaverse was the future, right? And to him, the metaverse meant we're all going to be wearing VR headsets, the big clunky sci-fi looking things with a screen 2 inches in front of our eyes, and we're all going to be exploring virtual worlds with these headsets on.
We're gonna be bukkake by
And
brands everywhere.
yeah, and just for a while, this was an in vogue idea, and it never made much sense to me. Nobody actually wants to do that. Nobody wants to listen to a podcast by strapping a 4 pound thing to your head and having that visor. There's a few like niche applications, like video gaming. Maybe there's some cool video games you can play with that, but nobody's going to have corporate meetings. Your Zooms are not going to turn into like metaverse things. It's just not going to happen. When you're scrolling Instagram, you don't want to do that again, laying on the couch with like the big clunky like virtual reality thing on your face. Like you just want to do it on your phone. So it never made much sense to me. And at some point they pumped so much money into this. I believe Mark Zuckerberg has lost something like 70 to 80 billion dollars trying to make the metaverse a thing. He renamed his whole company. He lost 80 billion dollars, and the whole thing just went nowhere. It has gone absolutely nowhere. No one has adopted this technology. Not from the Meta Vision Quest, which is what they call their thing. Not with the Apple Vision Pro or whatever it's called. Like nobody's buying. Not the Oculus. Like it's just gone nowhere. But the idea of the metaverse in terms of a platform where you can do lots of different things virtually, that exists, and it's called Roblox. And this is something I've written about, where if you're older, you may have no idea what Roblox is. It is by far the biggest video game in the world, by a lot. It's the biggest video game in the world. There are more monthly users for Roblox than there are people who play PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo Switch put together. Like, it is an absolutely enormous thing. And what Roblox is it's not really a single game as much as it is a platform for kids to build their own games. They build they build collectible games, they build horror games, they build, PvP shooter games, they build puzzles and exploration games, and just all kinds. They build social hangout spaces where the point is just to hang out and talk with your friends. And some of these games, like there's a game called Blocks Fruits, which is bigger than World of Warcraft by itself. There's a game called Steal a Brain Rot. No, there's a game called Steal a Brain Rot, which I believe is bigger than like League of Legends by itself. Like it is unbelievable the scale of what Roblox does. And I've written about this. I think it's very funny that Mark Zuckerberg spent $80 billion trying to make the metaverse happen when he could have just bought Roblox for like maybe $1 billion back in the day.
Yeah, I mean, just run the playbook, buy Instagram, And instead he got innovation mogged by some random ass company. And if we could go back to January 10th, 2022, go on a weird
Meta's
trajectory.
failing, and so are the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Thank
There's
you.
your transition.
Thank you. The game reaches its climax here after Georgia pushes the lead to 26-18. The Alabama Crimson Tide get the ball back with 3 minutes. Bryce Young, the Heisman Trophy winner. Are you worried a little bit?
At this point, I'm honestly freaking out more than I was when we were down. Yeah, when it's the first half and we're down by 3 points, I'm fine. When we're up by 8 and they have the ball and they're driving, I'm nervous like I've never been nervous before. Like it's so close. Like I can taste it, and just the experience of being a Georgia fan is telling me that something is going to go wrong. So this Alabama, it's something's going to happen. We're going to collapse again. So I'm incredibly nervous. Yeah.
And they do get into Georgia territory before Bryce Young goes downfield, left sideline. It's underthrown, and he has an escort, does Keely Ringo. Would you be reacting similarly to Kirby Smart's trajectory on this play, or his
Yeah.
roller coaster? Would it be similar roller coaster for what he wanted to see?
Yeah, honestly, yeah. I mean, so for those who don't know, Alabama has the ball. They have a chance to drive and get a tying touchdown and a 2-point conversion. And Bryce Young just underthrows a ball. He was Heisman Trophy winner, but that play, it's just on him. He just underthrew it. And Georgia got an interception. And Kirby Smart is like right there. It's that sideline. He's feet away. And he starts screaming, go down, like, don't try to run it back, just fall down and we can end the game. And instead, Keely Ringo runs it all the way back. It's like 75 yards for a touchdown. And Kirby Smart is on the sideline running beside him, screaming like, go down, go down. And then at some point he looks up and he's like, oh, there's like an open field. And he's like, okay. And he switches to like celebrating, like, okay. But yeah, no, that moment, I don't think I will ever forget that moment. It felt like my soul had like ascended, like I have seen the pearly gates, like I have seen heaven, and this, like, it exists, it's real, I get to enter it. I genuinely don't think I will forget that moment as long as I live. And that, you can go online and like look at somebody put together a compilation of like Georgia fans reacting to Keely Ringo's interception, and they're so like, these poor fans. You don't understand how battered and beat down the fan base was at this point, and how much of a catharsis, a release this was to finally be free. Like in that moment, we're free. Like we've done it. It's over. Like we finally won. And it was pretty special, man.
Yeah, had to wait since the 1980 season or New Year's Day 81 when they sealed the undefeated season against Notre Dame in the national title, or it was the Sugar Bowl, not the national title. Back then, you wanted
Yeah.
to be declared.
Back then, it was effectively the national title, because again, there was no real national title, right? But Georgia and Notre Dame were number 1 and number 2. So it was one of those years where it just worked out. There was kind of like a de facto national title. It didn't work out like that every year, but that year we knew is whoever won the Sugar Bowl was going to be the champion. And you want to know another fun fact from that game?
Yeah.
You can, if you go back and look at this, you can find this on YouTube. Herschel Walker dislocated his shoulder in basically his first run of the game. You can watch him. It's like a 8-10 yard run or something like that, and he's going out of bounds and he gets hit, and his shoulder is fully dislocated. You can see, if you know what you're looking for, that he like comes off and he has to get it popped back into place, and then he would go on to rush for like 130 yards with a dislocated shoulder, basically.
You do that in the state of Georgia, you can have whatever you want after a fake sheriff badge. You want that? Go for it.
except for a Senate seat,
Yeah.
apparently.
Once again, yeah, he
But no, man,
ran a full
it's
touchdown
funny, yeah.
behind the national environment. Yeah, unfortunately for him. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny, this felt like a passing of the torch too. Both the 2021 championship and the 22 when it became back to back, that Stetson Bennett has kind of replaced Herschel Walker as like the greatest player in the history of Georgia football. Because his story, you can't really tell this story without talking about Stetson Bennett, like a guy who was a two-star high school recruit, walked on to Georgia, was a backup, left to go play at like what do you call it, a JUCO, had a good JUCO year, came back to Georgia, got on scholarship as like as the third string quarterback. And he was just a guy who was never going to be anything, right? He was just a walk on who earned a scholarship, but was going to be the third string. And at the beginning of 2021, JT Daniels got hurt. And it was not even planned that when JT Daniels got hurt that Bennett was going to be the guy. Carson Beck was going to be the guy. I don't know if this is common knowledge, but Carson Beck was slated as the number 2 quarterback, and he just didn't play well enough. In fact, there are some rumors, by the way, there are some rumors that after JT Daniels got hurt, Carson Beck kind of was going around campus like, I'm the man now. I'm the man. Nobody better fuck with me. Like I'm hot shit now. And that the coaches didn't like it, so they started Stetson Bennett instead. And that like, this is kind of unconfirmed, but that is a thing that supposedly happened. But we do know that like coming out of spring training, Carson Beck was number 2 on the depth chart, and Bennett was 3. But Bennett was the one who ended up starting, and the rest is the former walk on. Threw for 300 yards against Michigan, threw for 300 yards in the championship, I think, against Alabama. And was the MVP of both of those games, and was the MVP of both playoff games in 2022. And you can't tell the story of this game or of the whole Georgia football renaissance without talking about him. So it's a remarkable story.
Like many of those Georgia players from the 2021 team in the NFL, backup for the Rams, and he's there with Warren McClendon. And we mentioned Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington with the Steelers, and then the whole Bulldogs Eagles pipeline. So you have this championship, you have all these players find NFL rosters, incredible success. You win a second title, but the challenge many sports fans have after seeing their first championship after being a fan for decades, can you reach that level of a endorphin rush again that you got from that first
Yeah.
title?
Yeah, I mean, I just try to stay humble. Like I'm trying to remember as a Georgia fan that like I'm in the good old times. When people look back and they're like, "Oh, I wish we were in the good old times." Like I'm in the good old times right now. Georgia won the SEC championship the last 2 years. We have not done well in the playoffs the last 2 years, but that's fine. Like to me, the SEC championship still matters a lot. That still is an important thing to win. We've won it 2 years in a row. I think we've won 3 of the last 4. Like I'm super happy. I'm trying not to be spoiled. Like it's great to be a Georgia Bulldog fan right now. So appreciate the good times while you're in them is my life advice for everyone out there.